Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while you heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird. Growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome back to Sober Psychology. Come on in, get close, let's sit down. This is episode 4. We're plugging along, and we're getting better and better, and that's what I told you we wanted to do. We wanted to slowly but surely start chipping away. I'm learning as I go. If you follow me, we just posted the first 3 episodes recently, which is great. Glad to have been able to do that. We're also throwing shorts and stuff up on YouTube. So got a little traction going. Again, there's a huge learning curve with this, and I'm trying to figure it all out slowly but surely and do it the right way, which oftentimes means that I'm just going to mess up and I have to accept it. So appreciate your grace. I appreciate all the love. This week has been great. I did not expect it to get the response that it did. I'm grateful that it did, though. Regardless, welcome back to episode 4. Today's a big one, and this is probably going to end up being a 2-parter. I'm going to go into explaining why. We are going to dig into higher power. Now, for me, I'm coming from an angle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm coming out of the big book. I'm coming from experience. I've wrestled with this one a lot. This episode is for some reason, it's very difficult for me to record, because I've learned from my own upbringing that there are a lot of people out there who are very religious human beings, Bible thumpers, and I am one who has changed the way I view religion. I've changed the way that I view my relationship with my higher power, and I've learned that you're never going to force feed that to somebody. It's an experiential thing. It's a relational thing. I'm not big on religion. As far as the routines go, if you will, the traditions. I grew up a Southern Baptist. I grew up in church. Every Wednesday night we had to have youth. Every Sunday morning we're doing Sunday school and Sunday service. Then you go back Sunday night. My parents had me in church, but then you see them live their lives and realize that they aren't practicing it. It's almost like we're doing it just for the imagery of it. And coming from a small town, that's a very common ordeal. Honestly, being involved in church in Western Christianity in general is that way. It's all about an image, right? You got the same people sitting in the same seats, and they're just there to shake hands and make it look like they have it all together. Now, that's not a whole story. That's a very big generality, but there are a lot of people who use religion for an image. I have been that person. I was the super Christian. I was the guy who was following God. And although I've wrestled for a vast majority of my life with God and the church and the ideals and principles and the Bible, I've come to this realization that it's a relational aspect. The relationship that I have with my higher power is not the same you're going to have with yours, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. It's also not my spot to criticize someone for their belief. Quite the contrary. I've now become so open-minded that I love talking with atheists. I love talking with people who are struggling. They're agnostic. I love talking. I have a friend who's a Buddhist. When I was going to jail, I met a guy who is a Muslim, and we had really good talks. I have a couple of Jewish friends as well. So it's all over the place, right? And the open-mindedness is what's important. As you can see in the logo, if you're watching the video or if you're not watching the video, all of our logos, as far as the banner is concerned, it's got all these trees, right? And it's a very ominous, dark, spooky kind of vibe to it. What we're going to do today is going to let you see where that comes from. It's the top of page 50 in Alcoholics Anonymous, big book. We missed the power and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. It's talking about prejudice. It's talking about our preconception and our judgmental view on how other people see things, experience things. I've dealt with a lot of people who grew up in church or have experienced church, and then they got burned by someone who says that they're a Christian. So then all of a sudden, for the rest of their life, now they choose to not be a Christian, which is interesting. There's a pretty famous quote by Gandhi. It said, "It's not your God I have the problem with, it's your Christians." And he was talking about believing in God, which is so true. I mean, the church in general is a house of hypocrites by design, mind you. Jesus knew that we were all hypocrites. I mean, look at the disciples. Go find me a perfect disciple of the 12. They did not exist. He got some of the worst of the worst. You look at one of the most prolific disciples in the Bible is Paul, and look at his heart and Paul's writings. That man used to kill Christians. That was his job. It wasn't like he was doing anything else. He was literally finding people, hunting people down who were Christians, just killing them. That was it. So all this to say, I grew up very judgmental. I grew up looking down on other people, all to realize that I am the exact same thing that I'm judging. I'm a hypocrite. I'm a liar. I'm a thief. I'm someone who uses religion for his own view, for his own image with other people. So this is going to be a very heavy episode. And again, probably going to be 2 parts, maybe even 3. We'll see how much we can get through today. But what I wanted to do was take a bunch of notes and give you a psychological breakdown and give you all of the overly spiritual jargon, which would probably immediately turn you off. The whole point of this podcast is to be approachable. The whole point of this podcast is to break the stigma. There's a huge stigma right now, and I've experienced this firsthand with churches looking down on addicts and alcoholics because they have tattoos, they've got a track record. I mean, hell, I'm a felon, you know? I've got a record. I've been to jail multiple times. Like, to be looked down on just because of that is wild to me. That is the exact opposite of what the church should be. So the whole point of this podcast is to break that stigma. And in order to do that, I felt the best way for me to do that is to genuinely come to you as a vessel. And that's what I did before recording this episode. I got quiet and I asked God just to use me. And I think putting down a bunch of notes and giving you the psychological analysis of all this would do nothing short of stroking my own ego. That's not what this is about. Whether you call God God, whether you call him the Marlboro Man sitting up in the clouds, having a nice cigarette while he's, looking down on you, whatever it may be. I know the word God is difficult for some people. I completely understand that. The Big Book addresses that as well. That's why it refers to God as the higher power. There are different ways to look at it too. Narcotics Anonymous, I know that they tell you that you can look at your higher power as a doorknob if you want to. My understanding of it is that whatever the higher power is, it needs to have more power than me, and it needs to be infinite. I am a Christian. I am a believer in the Bible. I read the Bible daily. I pray daily. I have a relationship with God now that is completely different than what it was 5-6 years ago. The reason I am sober is because of God. It's because God equipped me to be able to do the hard work. I'm not going to short myself on any of this. I put in some work, and every single day is a battle, as we addressed in the previous episodes. But I want this to be approachable. Again, as always, you can reach out to me if I said something that you don't fully understand or you don't agree with or you want to just talk about. I'm not one who's going to shoot you down because you come at me and say God isn't real. I want to talk about it. I want to learn about your viewpoint and why you're saying that, and how we can talk together and learn from one another through this. I would ask you the same thing. Just be open-minded. That's all you can be. You don't have to agree with or believe in anything that I'm saying or that any other Christian or theologian or whoever else is talking to you. You don't have to believe it. At the end of the day, there's a human-to-human connection in all of this. We're all messed up. We're all screwed up. There is not a perfect Christian on this planet, period. I don't care who's tried to make you feel less than because they're a believer in God. If they're trying to make you feel less than because they're a believer in God, they're doing the exact opposite of what God would have them do. So bingo, there you go. But I want to talk through this, and the best way that I know how to do this is literally read chapter 4, which is titled We Agnostics. I'm going to do this in the format that I would be doing like a big book lesson if I'm talking to a bunch of dudes in rehab. And we're going to work through it. It's not just going to be reading line by line until it's over. This is, from page 44 to 57. I've got notes all over it, all over my book. Again, if you're watching the video, like, you can see it, like, it's just riddled with notes. But I'm gonna let God use me in this, and I just want to see how it goes. This may be a flop, but we're gonna try it. We're gonna still try and keep this episode in the 40-minute range, and hopefully we can stop at an appropriate point and then continue to move on. But starting out, these are some of the notes that I went ahead and took. Starting in with a higher power, there is conception and there is perception. And I'm going to address this too, but I grew up with a perception and everybody else's view of God kind of meshed together. Everyone told me about their experiences. And because I'm a manipulator and because I'm a chameleon and because I had a hard time knowing who I was, I took that as my identity. So my experience wasn't real. My experience was just a culmination of everybody else's experience, right? And I lived like that for years and years and years. And I operated under the manner of thinking that if I say it enough and I act like it enough, then it'll come true. And the reality is I was left empty. It wasn't until I got sober that I gained, for the first time in my life, my own conception of who God was. And my conception of God is someone who, despite all of my flaws, I still can't understand it, but still loves me, still forgives me, and is still willing to provide me with the necessary strength and power. And we'll go into that too, but that is my own personal conception. My relationship with my God is not the same relationship that my wife is going to have with the same God, right? It's a personal relationship, one-on-one. I'm different from everybody else, just like you're different from me. And your relationship is your relationship. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to define it. You need to define it for yourself, I believe. But that's conception versus perception. And I know that as someone who grew up on the Bible Belt in Louisiana, it's very easy to have a perception of God. It's very easy growing up listening to Sunday school stories and thinking that God is this mystical figure like Santa Claus, and that's just who he is. I don't know. I don't really know how to define the physical appearance of God. There are references to it all over the Bible. But I do know that my conception of God, I don't really need to define that, right? I need to have the relationship with God that I have, where I'm constantly picking up my cross and I'm following him daily, right? I don't do anything under my own power. And when I do, I fail. That is the story of my life. You know, for a decade plus, I tried to self-will my life and it didn't work out. This is going to be, we're going to go through this, but page 44 is a good reference. It's talking about our choices as alcoholics and addicts, to be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis. To be doomed is one option, or to live on a spiritual basis. So without the spiritual basis in our lives, we don't live. We're doomed, right? So the death or spirituality now becomes the dynamic, and you start to see that, right? But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. This is directly from the big book, right? And that or else means death. And that was the case 100% for me that I experienced. I started pulling away from God. I started ignoring God. I started acting like God wasn't real, because what has God done for me in my life? Michael is God. I'm going to be God. And so I started serving myself, and everything that I was doing crashed and burned. I have a limited supply of energy. I have a limited supply of power. Now, some people may have more naturally than others, but mine ran out. And when it ran out, I crashed and burned. It got bad. Then on page 45, lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. So that's where I was going at with the higher power aspect. The higher power has to be greater than ourselves. If I say that my higher power is a doorknob or my favorite hat or something, right? The idea is there of getting myself away from being the higher power, but that hat and that doorknob, they don't have the power that I can draw off of. They don't have the power that can be transferred to me to allow me to become better. And this is the interesting part about addiction and alcoholism. With most diseases in life, the best you can hope for is to get back to a standard. I want to get back to being as healthy as I was before I got this disease, right? But with alcoholism and addiction, when we find the solution for our disease, we become better versions of ourselves. And this is because of our higher power, right? This is also because we're learning to serve other people, but we become better than what we were. right? So that's a fascinating thing for me to understand because it's easy to get into that self-pity mindset. You mean I'm an alcoholic forever? I can't have a drink? You mean I cannot have a drink like forever? That's awful. And instead of sitting in self-pity about it, I get the opportunity to realize that I get to be a better human being. And again, we've gone over this before. I think this is the first episode. But I wouldn't have what I have today if I hadn't gotten sober. Like I have a woman who loves me. I have a wife that is just, we have a relationship where we're growing every single day. I have the opportunity to be able to serve her, to take myself away from myself and to serve her. I get to serve my child that's on the way. I get to live in a home that no one's going to take away from me until we stop paying the bills, which is, hey, times are tough. But it's just an interesting reality of understanding that I have to draw from this source that has more power than I do, because I cannot sustain my life for the rest of my life all on my own. I'll crash and burn every time. Normal people deal with this too, right? Even people who aren't, I say normal people, but y'all know what I mean, non-alcoholics and addicts. The people who have, and these people, the people who are narcissists, the people who have a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. Yeah, maybe for a while they can get it going. And for a while, I mean, they may be for 40, 50 years, they may be good. They may have just done enough to get by, but there's going to come a point in everybody's life, maybe it's on your deathbed, where it all comes to, you just realize that your power ran out. You have nothing. You've been running on fumes. And that's fine. Like, if that's the way you want to live, then do it. That's great. I'm someone who, I don't want to just survive. I want to thrive. And that doesn't mean that I have to go make $10 million in a year. That doesn't mean that I have to have the Lamborghini sitting out in the driveway. That means that in order to give that love, in order to raise children, in order to be a husband that my wife is proud of, that raises her, that supports her and loves her as if she were a child of God. In order to be able to do that, in order to love myself, I have to tap into this power. And self can't see self, right? We cannot with 100% accuracy understand who we are, our faults, our dilemma. And so it takes other people, which I'm a believer that God speaks through other people for us to be able to hear it. It takes seeing it from that angle to be able to understand, I can't do this by myself. I have to love myself. I got to figure out. And let me tell you, that's one hell of a journey if you get sober, to go back and look at all of the nonsense that you've done. I have had a hard time not hating myself for the pain that I've caused other people. And I've hurt a lot of people I care about, family, friends, people that had no business being hurt by me. I've hurt them. And it takes a lot to not hate myself. And this is on a daily basis. This isn't just like, I fixed it, I'm good. On a daily basis, I'm constantly asking God, and this is a big ask, but I'm asking God constantly to help me see myself the way that he sees me. And in order for that to work, in order for that to become reality, I have to keep drawing close to God. Help me learn who I am. Like, I want to learn everything from you. I'm never going to know God. The finite mind can't understand the infinite, but I can continue to come to him and ask for that reality to set in and to learn to love myself. And that's a big one. I'm already rambling. This is definitely going to be a 3-parter. From a psychological standpoint, belief in a higher power promotes a thing called pro-social shift, right? And this is where our focus becomes on other people. It's other oriented, right? So a pro-social shift is a direct result of drawing close to a higher power, the belief in a higher power. So we make conscious effort to put others first without abandoning our own needs. It's a tough balance, right? I know a lot of good men, hardworking men, dudes that are working 80 hours a week, and that's their mentality. As long as I'm putting a roof over my family's head, as long as I'm putting food on the table, that's all they need. And I get it. That's even a biblical concept, is that a husband provides, right? A man provides, but there's more than that. You're not just providing monetarily. You have to provide spiritually. You have to provide emotionally. You have to provide physically. You provide in a lot of different ways. So when we get to this healthy point, like with my wife, this has been a very difficult time for me personally, because right before I got into school, right when we got this house, I was laid off of my job. And that hurt, because for the first time in my life, I was 100% sober through the course of working, and I got laid off. And that's just the oil field for you. That's what you get. But then I got another job, and then that job, we ran out of money, basically. Couldn't pay the payroll. And so it's been difficult because my wife, while she's pregnant, is carrying the weight. But while she's doing that, I'm in school, and this is us investing in the future, because there's going to come a point here soon where I'm going to be able to be fully employed with the degree that I needed to get in order to have that employment. And then she gets to kick back a little bit, right? But I know a lot of men who are in that same situation who hate themselves because of that. And I've had a hard time not doing it. I'm not saying that's, unreasonable. But for me to be at a point where I love myself enough, I understand who I am, and I know that I'm not quitting, I'm not being lazy, I'm not sitting back and resting on my laurels. My wife and I communicate about this daily. We're on the same page here. It's not easy, but my identity is not wrapped up in my work and the job and what I'm providing financially. It's also, what am I doing? Am I just going to sit here in a room and cry about it and not be an emotional support for my wife, not be a spiritual support for my wife? That's not what I believe God would have me do. And it's not who I believe God would have me be, right? So this is a tough balance, but that pro-social shift comes from the mentality and the belief and the faith of having a higher power. Pro-social shift allows us to focus on others. Our mindset becomes other-oriented, right? And then we learn the balance of being able to put others first without abandoning what we need, right? It's a tough balance, and it's a learning curve, especially in a marriage. We do this all the time. I mean, I've run into so many situations with my wife where I need stuff and I'm not communicating it well. But because I feel like I need to serve her, I give and give and give, and I don't get anything back. And so you have to learn to find that balance. All right. So now we're going to get into the reading of this, and we're just going to go line by line here, and I'm just going to talk about it as we go. And again, this is the only way I know how to do this. This is the only way I know how to do this. I'm going to try and put a picture in the show notes, but if you look at a picture of the big book, which is the first 167 pages, that's the main part of the book. Then there are stories after it. So I believe it's 400 pages total. If you look at the big book, after all the higher power references are taken out, that book is like 80 pages. And I'll put that picture in there. We may be able to do it if you're watching here on YouTube. There it is. There's the picture. I mean, look how ridiculous that is. How much smaller that book is without the higher power reference. But this is very important, right? This is another thing to realize too. As an addict and alcoholic, if you want to get sober and stay sober, it does not happen without the higher power, period. It says it all throughout this book. This is the main purpose, okay? So this is a big one. We're going to wrestle with it. We're going to go into multiple parts, but here we go. In the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably an alcoholic. In our second episode where we are explaining addiction, those are the two qualifying questions, right? So these are the two things that qualify you as an alcoholic or addict. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Only a spiritual experience will conquer. And notice it says experience, okay? So this is an experiential relationship that you're about to embark on. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Here we go. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. So go back to the beginning of that where it's saying, but to continue as he is means disaster. That's on our self-will, right? That's all by ourselves. If we don't have the higher power, we're missing all of it and we're going to be doomed. It's disaster. And then to be doomed to an alcoholic death is one option, or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face, but those are your alternatives. That's it. There's not another one. That's another thing I love about the big book as well as the Bible is you're not going to find gray areas. It's either this or that, right? But it isn't so difficult. There you go. There's your hope. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. Half. This is back in the 20s, mind you. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. That or else means death. We talked about that at the beginning of this episode. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheist or agnostic. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. It says over half of us thought we were atheist or agnostic. When I met my wife, she thought she was an atheist. And there are genuine atheists out there. I have a hard time understanding how you can experience things in life and just believe that it came from nothing or that it means nothing, which is difficult. Again, I know a bunch of atheists and I have great conversations with them. I don't think that because you're an atheist, it makes you a bad person. I really don't. I know some people who are atheists and or say that they're atheists and they're good people. It does not mean that you're hopeless. It does not mean that you're helpless. It means that you're helpless because you're doing all this by yourself, but it doesn't mean that you're hopeless, that you're a lost cause, right? A lot of us go through that. I, as a Christian, even in my sobriety, I've struggled with God. I've struggled with the idea of God. I've struggled with the understanding of God. I've struggled with the realization of it. Again, our finite minds can't understand the infinite. And this is a tough go, man. This is going to be a constant wrestle. Go talk to a pastor. Go talk to a priest. And if they're being honest with you, they'll tell you they've struggled. They've wrestled with God their whole life. It's a constant human condition that we're dealing with here, right? Here we go. Here's a big one. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. I'm going to read that again because that's important. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. This isn't just about following rules. And I understand that a lot of you may think that God is it's just a set of rules for Christians to follow to make themselves feel better. It's just that's all God does. He just controls you. I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of God, not the control of God, to the care of God. That's the idea of free will, and that's a tough one. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. Okay? You're not just going to make this off of following rules. That's not even what the big book is. I know it has 12 steps, but it's a guidance point, right? This is a framework for the way that you should and could live your life. But the reality is that it's not enough just listening to rules, just reading rules, just following a self-help book, just doing somebody's 20 steps and all this kind of stuff. This is an experiential aspect to life. This is a relationship that you're going to have with a higher power that is greater than yourselves, and it takes faith. Faith is not tangible. Faith is not something that you can necessarily hold on to and show off to other people. This is a real thing, and it's very, very difficult. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us. I told you so. No matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. Hey, did I mention I'm trying to get my master's? LOL. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all of our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. It's going back to what we were talking about. Living life on self-will is not sufficient. You're not going to be able to make it. The needed power is not there. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. Boom, there it is. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously. Now, if you've ever read the Big Book, which I hope y'all do, even if you're not an alcoholic or addict, this is a great book for anxiety, depression, for anything going on with life. This is a great book. But Bill is an absolute arrogant asshole, which is why I relate very well with him. But he makes these little, obviously, right? So it makes you feel like an idiot. But when you take a step back and you realize how simple this is, it's simple, but it's not easy. You feel like an idiot sometimes. That's what I felt like. Like, this is all I had to do. Like, that was it. That was the solution the whole time. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. For an alcoholic struggling at the end of his rope, thinking in suicidal manner, struggling, whatever it may be, to hear that is a huge boost, right? Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. It's going back to what we talked about too, with a lot of people that have their preconceptions of what religion is, what spirituality is. And as soon as you hear that word God, it turns people off, right? As soon as you hear spirituality or religion, it turns you off. These are key words that just shoot, immediately shoot you down or shut you down. And that's understandable, right? And so all this is showing you is that you're not alone in that thinking. It's not, I think once you're aware of it, it's wrong to continue to think that way. But the initial thoughts there, the emotions that arise from it, that's not wrong. I still have a hard time. Like when I'm doing something that I know I shouldn't do, if I've just been piss and vinegar all day and I've been mad about something and I hear God, I kind of like shrug a little bit. I'm like, oh, God, no, because it's this conviction, right? I know that I need to get right with God. I know that I need to just be laying all of this down at his feet instead of trying to figure it all out on my own. But that's what this is talking about, right? You're not alone in that. We know how it feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious, violently. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Okay? Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. How many of you think that Christians are weak? Now, look, I'm going to shoot you straight, and I'll probably get in trouble here with the Christian community, but there has been a time with me growing up where Christians were soft. I still think today Christians struggle with that. They're soft, right? Christians are supposed to be a warrior in a garden instead of a gardener in a war. We're not supposed to be soft. There's a tough and tender side to Jesus. Yes, correct. That was the example that was set. That doesn't mean that you go around and punch people in the face and say, oh, yeah, God loves you. No, but you don't have to be soft and delicate and sweet and dainty. And there's this whole movement of Christian men. Like I've lived in Waco for almost a decade, and I saw some Christian men coming out of the private Christian university there that I was just like, how in the world could you ever lead? How in the world could you ever have some level of spiritual authority that was given to you? Like, who would ever, anyways, we're not going to get into that, but this is telling you that it's understanding of the fact that you see a Christian and you think, oh, that's pretty cowardly. And it's tough to live that life. Do you know how many times I just want to destroy someone verbally when they say something that I don't like? Instead, I've just got to bite my tongue, and I'm not good at it, but I mean, that's part of the practice, right? And it's easy to look at that and be like, ah, dude's weak. Now, I'll tell you this, there's definitely a line that you don't cross. You come in here and you start talking to my wife a certain way, you start talking about my family a certain way. I'm from the south side of the kingdom, homie. Like we're going to have some problems. However, it's a struggle constantly, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be weak and submissive and passive and whatnot. So I get why people think that. We looked upon this word of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism, which is just basically saying we look down on Christians, right? We looked askance. That's what basically look down means. We looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it at all, or with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? I'm so sick sometimes of how Bill writes. He's so fantastical. Is that a word? It is now. There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that, and here we go, this is the big one too. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. That's an experience, right? When you lay down your prejudice, when you get rid of all of those thoughts of thinking that religion is stupid, God is stupid, anything like that is stupid, and you just give it a chance, genuine chance, not a half-assed, half-hearted chance, but a real chance. As soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. That is so freaking huge, and I can attest to that being real. When I first read this, I had been sober for, against my will, by the way, I had been sober for maybe a week, and I was just mad at the world. I was mad at everything. I was mad at God. I was mad at just anything and everything. But when it finally broke and I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot and just see if anything happens. I'm not kidding you. I don't know how to explain it. It's a spiritual experience because I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, I guess, whatever it may be, but it happens, right? Lay down my prejudice. I put everything aside and I just finally give it a shot. And it happened as soon as. It's wild. It really is. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. So this is just saying, like, God's there, man. And this is tough. If you ever read the story of the prodigal son, like, that's a very telling aspect to God's character, right? He just loves you and he's there. And no matter how many times you break his heart and push him away and curse at him and whatever, he's still there. And that's the grace and mercy that we can't understand, because if somebody treats me the way that I've treated God, I'm going to lose my mind. And I don't know if I'll ever accept them back in my life. Like, that's the reality of it. But God's there, right? So anyways, this is just talking about the fact that this is and an interesting thing that we used to do in rehab too, is everybody would close their eyes and the guy would say, hey, just think of a hat. I want all of you to think of a hat. And then when you open your eyes and you tell them what the hat looked like that you were thinking of, everybody has a completely different hat, but it's still a damn hat, isn't it? And so that's the interesting part about your relationship with God. It's not going to be the same as your friend. Don't live off of somebody else who's having a relationship with God, trying to think that you need their conception of God. You don't. You need your own conception of God. And that's what this is saying. Like, when you finally break down and just try it, just try it. Like, I'm not saying try God out. You know, I think that's a cheapening way of doing it. But if that's what you need to do, just try. Let go of all of these preconceptions and all of these negative thoughts and actually give it a go. And it's crazy how quickly things start to happen. Here's another part, as soon as, right? As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. So the we began part, to me, is like we started to believe, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me of sanity, right? We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. God is not hard, sharp, or pressing, okay? To use the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. The word seek is written all over the rehab that I went to. It's in pencil, it's in marker, it's all over the place, right? Seek and you will find. That's from the Bible. If we're just being at a point, you don't have to share this. You don't have to go brag about it. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to have people qualify it for you. Just seek God. Keep seeking and don't stop. It's messy. You're not going to know how to pray. It's going to be freaking awkward at first. You don't know how to read the Bible. Things in a different language, it seems like. So just keep seeking, keep trying. That's all you do. If you really, 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 like, as a guy, right? If you really want a relationship with a girl, what do? You just try one time. Like, if she is a bombshell, 10 out of 10, coolest personality you've ever seen, and you just say, all right, hey, I'd really like to go on a date with you. And then she says no. Are you done? Are you one of those people? Because I can guarantee you, if you do that, you're never getting the girl. No, what do? We like the pursuit. We like the hunt. We like the chase. We like the whatever it is. So we're going to keep going after it. I'm not going to accept no. I'm going to keep going. I'm a salesman. I got a sales background. No is just a means for me to start working into a different type of conversation, right? Let's see. Your lack of disconnect from God is because of your lack of humility to change what he's bringing to your attention. I wrote that at the bottom of this page. And that's a big one. Your lack of disconnect from God is because of your lack of humility to change what he's bringing to your attention. That's a tough one. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God, right? This is the bespoke. This is the custom relationship, right? This applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him, right? Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our conception, however limited it was. This is the willingness to believe. You're never going to understand God. You're never going to understand the entirety of the Bible and all of the concepts and all of the experiences these other people have had. You're never going to fully understand an infinite being. But this is our willingness to believe. That can't be the thing that deters you. That has to be the thing that overwhelms you and says, okay, I'm going to learn as much as I can. I want to continue to grow. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? It's just, am I willing to believe it? You may not understand it yet. You may not have it figured out. That's fine. Am I willing to believe? Okay, I'm willing to accept the fact that there's something out there bigger than me. Done. As soon as, this is all over this chapter, by the way, as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, your cornerstone is your willingness, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. This is the beginning of it, right? So the cornerstone is so crucial. It's so important. This is what the house is built on. You take down that cornerstone piece, everything falls apart. My willingness to believe. Here we go. That is my cornerstone. That was great news for us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did they all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes, but I cannot accept as surely true many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. This is the authenticity part of it, right? You do not have to be a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I've read the Bible a lot. I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of people who are a lot more intelligent than I am when it comes to spiritual matters and the understanding of the Bible and concepts. They speak Hebrew and they speak all of the languages that, were originally spoken in the Bible. And that's intimidating because in my mind, I think I can't be that close to God because I don't have the knowledge base that they have. And all it takes is just my willingness to believe. God even says in the Bible that we should be like infants in the way that we approach the Christianity. We're so in awe. We have this wonderment about us, right? We want to learn more and more and more, but yet we know so little. That's how we're always going to be. I could be a Christian for 20 years and I'm still a baby Christian, right? I could read the Bible and do an in-depth research study on it every single month. I'm still going to know so little about it, and that's okay. That can't be a deterrent. That can't be the excuse that I'm beginning to create, because a lot of us will do that, right? Like I'm gonna step into it. I'm gonna have this faith, right? This faith because I see how these other Christians live and I see how free they are, and that's what I want. But the moment that I read, one chapter of the Bible, I'm like, I don't understand that. This is stupid, and then I'm done. And it's tough. Men especially have a difficult time with faith. I would say humans in general have a difficult time with faith because you can't explain it. I can't go out there and earn faith. I can't bring it home and put food on the table. It's not a tangible object. It's not a ticket, right? It's a constant work. You can't explain it. You can't, you get into an argument with an atheist, which I haven't gotten into a lot of arguments, but I've had a couple in my life, and it always comes down to faith. They're very scientifically, they think very scientifically, and they want to explain everything. I want an answer for everything. I'm that way too. But at a certain point, I just can't. I don't have an explanation for you. It's faith. I have faith that this is going to work out. Does that make me a blind sheep? You betcha. But the good news is I'm following a shepherd who will leave the 99 just for me. And that's wild. Okay. We're going to wrap it up there. This is going to be part 1. We're definitely going to do a part 2, probably a part 3. Because again, I want to get through this and do this the right way. As always, if you guys have been hanging out, I really appreciate it. Go check us out on Facebook. We upload the videos on YouTube as well. I say it's me. It's a one-man show right now, but videos are uploaded on YouTube. We've got shorts I'm trying to create as well. Haven't ventured off into TikTok yet. I promise I'm getting there. But you can always reach out to me on Twitter. You can always reach out to me on Instagram. You can always hit me up with my email, which is just soberpsychology@gmail.com. If you have any questions, If you want to argue, if you want to talk, we'll find a way to make that happen. But I'm here for you guys. I'm here to serve. I'm here to be a vessel. I'm here to give freely what was so freely given to me. I don't know who you are who's listening, but I love you. I care about you deeply. I promise you that. And I want you to have the freedom. Everybody deserves that freedom, right? You deserve to be able to live a life where you can love yourself. Okay. As always, go help somebody, be there, serve others, keep your head up, keep your heart open. We'll catch you on the next episode.